It's 5 p.m. across India. I'm Tanvi Taneja. Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Global. We'll bring you all the day's big stories from across India and the world. With me today from Paris is my colleague Ross Cullen. Namaste, Ross.
It's 12:30 p.m. across Central Europe, and coming up in the next 30 minutes, the former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is facing questioning from a public inquiry into his handling of the coronavirus pandemic. Plus, the EU is facing a risk of terror attacks in the upcoming Christmas period. Now let's go back to Tanvi for the headlines.
Israel's Prime Minister urges nations to speak up on Hamas's sexual violence against Israeli women on October the 7th, requests urgent action to help free hostages in Gaza. Former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson apologizes for the loss of life during the COVID-19 pandemic inquiry underway.
That I understand the feelings of these victims and their families, and I am deeply sorry for the pain and the loss and the suffering of those victims.
Ratings agency Moody's puts China on downgrade warning as growth and property pressures mount there. S&P Global Rating says India will be the third largest economy by 2030. And in yet another warning of climate change, 2011 to 2020 declared the warmest ever decade by the World Meteorological Organization. First news from West Asia. The Israeli army released videos on Wednesday showing ground troops operating in Gaza and conducting aerial strikes on Hamas targets. This comes just a day after the military reached the heart of southern Gaza town of Khan Yunis. The footage shows soldiers engaged in combat in residential areas, armored vehicles and tanks firing ammunition. A video filmed inside a classroom showed soldiers revealing what the Israeli army says was an explosive device that was placed inside a school. Now, as Israeli defense forces expand their operations in Gaza, the army spokesperson called on the international community to take urgent action to help free hostages. He added that every minute of hostage captivity endangered their lives.
As the IDF expands its operations to dismantle Hamas in Gaza, we have not lost sight, not for one moment, of our critical mission to rescue our hostages, to do everything in our power to bring our hostages home. This is an urgent call for action. The international community must take action. The Red Cross must have access to the hostages that are in the hands of Hamas. 138 hostages, children, women, men, the elderly, have been in Hamas captivity for over 60 days. In brutal and inhumane conditions. Every day, every hour, every minute is critical.
DD India's Sarah Coates joins us live from Tel Aviv. And now, Sarah, what is the latest situation on the ground and how bad is the humanitarian situation in southern Gaza?
Hi there, Tanvi. Well, look, according to the military, heavy hand-to-hand fighting is continuing deep inside Khan Yunis. This is the biggest southern city in the Gaza Strip, and before this war began, it was home to around 450,000 people. Now, the military says that over the last 24 hours, it's killed at least 4 senior Hamas commanders and also hit around 250 Hamas targets. These include weapons storage facilities and other ammunition stashes. Now, according to other reports, this is unconfirmed at this hour, of course, by the military, that IDF troops have also surrounded the home, which is in Khan Yunis, of the head of Hamas in the Gaza Strip, Yahya Sinwar, although he is not believed to be home right now, believed to be potentially hiding in one of these underground tunnels, with the military continuing to say that he is a dead man walking. Now, right now, the Israeli army has revised the number of soldiers that have been killed to more than 80 as this fighting, not only in the north, but in the south of the Gaza Strip, continues to rage on. Now, the military is continuing to warn people to move further south down toward Rafah, although residents on the ground, Tanvi, say there is absolutely nowhere safe to go. Now, with regards to the humanitarian situation, the United Nations is calling it apocalyptic, saying there is simply not enough on the ground to go around for the amount of people that need it, while we are hearing also from Doctors Without Borders, with this organisation saying that there are barely any medical supplies to treat the amount of people that continue to come into these hospitals. So certainly very, very worrying. And as you can see behind me, this heavy weather is really setting in, and that is the same situation that these people down in the Strip are facing. Many of them don't have anywhere to shelter.
Sarah, Israel is saying it's doing everything to release the 138 hostages still in captivity with Hamas for over 60 days. What is the latest on efforts on freeing them?
Well, look, Israel says it is doing everything, but these families firmly disagree with that statement. They say that the government needs to do more, needs to do whatever it can to bring these people back. Now, as of yesterday, the number of people that are being held in the Gaza Strip by Hamas has been revised. It was 137. It's now gone up to 138. And what we do need to remember is these people have been held there now for more than 2 months. There's no information on their welfare, their whereabouts, and they have had not a single visit from the International Red Cross. Now, somebody just spoke out on Army radio with a report saying that it may be at least a month before there's enough pressure, military pressure on Hamas to be able to get some sort of a truce window to get these people out. And there was yesterday a War Cabinet meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, and also a number of these families, and also recently released hostages. And they say that Netanyahu said, no, not right now. I don't think we can get these people out at this stage. And that is drawing a lot of anger, a lot of condemnation. People calling on him to step down, saying that if you can't even run a War Cabinet meeting, then how can you run a country? So certainly very, very concerning, given the amount of people still being held there, and also these reports coming in that Israel is potentially considering flooding these tunnels that run right underneath the Gaza Strip with seawater to flush out Hamas operatives. But these families say it may in fact kill their loved ones instead.
Sarah, thank you for those updates. Sarah Coates reporting to us from Tel Aviv. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu earlier said that he heard the stories of sexual abuse at a meeting with hostages who returned during a recent pause in the fighting in Gaza. He called out on the women's and human rights organizations to act upon it. Israeli police has released the accounts of sexual violence in Hamas attack, where victims were tortured and physically abused.
I say to the women's rights organizations, to the human rights organizations, you've heard of the rape of Israeli women? Horrible atrocities, sexual mutilation? Where the hell are you? I expect all civilized leaders, governments, nations to speak up against this atrocity.
On to Europe now. Former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is making a much-anticipated appearance before an inquiry today into his handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, including claims of his government's incompetence. My colleague Ross Cullen is in Paris. He gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Ross, a lot at stake for Johnson, not only his reputation, but that of the Conservative Party.
Yeah, that's right. The former UK Prime Minister attending a public inquiry facing questions over his government's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, at the start of his appearance in the inquiry on Wednesday, he apologised for the loss of life in the pandemic while delivering statements to the inquiry lawyers. Now, the inquiry's already heard damaging testimonies about Johnson's handling of the crisis, and the former UK Prime Minister faces a second day of questioning on Thursday as part of the official investigation into why Britain ended up with one of the highest numbers of dead globally during the pandemic.
That I understand the feelings of these victims and their families, and I am deeply sorry for the pain and the loss and the suffering of those victims.
Also in London, a 42-year-old woman was killed and 2 others were injured in a shooting in the east of the British capital. The shooting occurred in a small housing development in the Hackney district. London's Metropolitan Police have launched a murder inquiry. No arrests have been made so far. Now to the latest in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and Moscow's defense ministry claimed its forces shot down 2 Ukrainian fighter jets and 1 helicopter and intercepted an anti-radiation missile. Russian forces repelled Ukrainian offensives to reclaim territory in Kupiansk and Liman. On the same day, Ukraine's armed forces say it destroyed more of Russia's electronic warfare systems. And according to Ukrainian officials, people's homes and commercial buildings were damaged by drone debris in various regions. The European Union is facing a huge risk of terror attacks in the upcoming Christmas period. That's according to the bloc's Home Affairs Division in a warning on Tuesday. Ahead of a meeting of the European Union's Home Affairs ministers in Brussels, the Home Affairs chief, Ove Johansson, said with the war between Israel and Hamas and the polarisation it causes in our society, and also with the upcoming holiday season, especially Christmas, there is a huge risk of terrorist attacks in the European Union. Her assessment is based on the steep increase in extremist propaganda circulating online, as well as the rising threat level in member states amid recent attacks in Belgium and here in France.
With the war between Israel and Hamas and the polarization it causes in our society, with the upcoming holiday season, there is a huge risk of terrorist attacks in the European Union. We saw recently in Paris, unfortunately we have seen it earlier as well. We will now make available additional 30 million euros for protection of, for example, places of worship in this situation.
The Australian government has urged the opposition to support legislation regarding immigration detainees released after a landmark ruling by the country's top court. Last month, Australia's High Court spoke out about unlawful detention as there was no real prospect that the detainees could be removed from Australia. The ruling overturned a 20-year-old ruling regarding the same issue. The proposed law will allow the government to refer non-citizen detainees to judges who will decide whether they pose a risk to the community. The United States and Sweden have signed a defence cooperation agreement. The US Secretary of Defence Lloyd Austin and Swedish Defence Minister Per Johnson met at the Pentagon before signing the agreement on Tuesday. The agreement comes, as the Nordic country strengthens military alliances as it waits for approval from Turkey and Hungary, who are holding up its bid to join NATO. In a meeting, Lloyd Austin said both countries will continue to learn from each other, building defence capabilities and strengthening interoperability.
We're going to sign a defense cooperation agreement today, and that will embody our shared commitment to the defense relationship between our 2 proud democracies. We look forward to learning from each other as we can our interoperability. Sweden has shown outstanding leadership in supporting Ukraine as it fights Russian aggression, including providing $2.7 billion in security and humanitarian assistance.
AI industry experts will gather in New York on Wednesday for the 8th annual Artificial Intelligence Summit to forecast the industry's trajectory. The summit spans 2 days and brings together knowledge leaders, policymakers and corporate executives for speeches and workshops. DD India's Sally Patterson gives us more now.
It's an opportunity to rub shoulders with some of the biggest names in AI. Representatives from technology companies, financial institutes and governments are set to hold talks and then stick around for networking afterwards. Tech giants including Microsoft, OpenAI and Google are all on the bill. Organisers say the summit, held on December 6th and 7th, will showcase how businesses are implementing and financing AI in a rapidly changing world. It comes just over a month after the UK held a major AI safety summit, looking at the risks of the economy and the industry. World leaders around the world are grappling with how to regulate it. In New York this week, the risks of AI will once again be in focus, tackling bias in technology, for example, but also opportunities for Sally Patterson in New York, reporting for DD India.
And that's it from me here in Paris. Back to you now in the studio, Tanvi.
Thank you very much, Ross, for joining us. Ross Callan joining us from our Paris bureau. Meanwhile, the 8th edition of the Global Technology Summit is taking place in New Delhi. The summit is convening to discuss questions related to technology, its impact on geopolitics, and policy issues related to new, critical, and emerging technologies. Other areas of discussion included cross-cutting policy issues related to innovation and national security, India over the education, as well as financial services. At the ongoing summit, India's Minister for Electronics and Information Technology, Rajiv Chandrasekhar, said that India considers artificial intelligence as the biggest and most significant invention. He added that India considers artificial intelligence to be a kinetic enabler of the digital and innovation economy.
As we move forward and there are these new, more powerful technologies, emerging technologies that are going to come at us, I am concerned, as most of us should be concerned, that governments, when they react, they tend to overreact. And certainly in the final session, I made it clear that India's position is not to overly obsess and demonize AI and look at this only through the prism of safety and trust. We consider AI as the biggest, most significant invention in our times. We consider AI to be a kinetic enabler of the digital economy and the innovation economy. And we certainly believe that there is a case to be made to harness AI, to make AI deliver its potential.
You're watching DD India Global, still to come on the show. Russian President Vladimir Putin holding talks on oil, OPEC Plus, and the conflicts in Gaza and Ukraine with Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And Cyclone MCJ weakens after ravaging India's southern states of Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. Prime Minister Moody extends condolences to the victims. We get to the heart of the matter.
We don't just present facts, we demystify complex social, political and economic events.
We break stories that shape the world's present and future, because you deserve the truth.
I am Tanvi Taneja from New Delhi.
I'm Ollie Barrett from London.
I'm Nick Harper from Washington, D.C.
Join us on DD India Global Monday to Friday at these times.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I am Tanvi Taneja. Russian President Vladimir Putin is in Abu Dhabi. Putin is visiting the UAE and Saudi Arabia in a rare trip abroad. Putin is currently holding talks with United Arab Emirates President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. They met this year at the Russian Davos, an economic forum in St. Petersburg. The Russian president will be holding talks with Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to discuss oil, OPEC Plus, and the conflicts between Israel, Hamas, and Russia, Ukraine. And next, latest from the COP28 summit underway in Dubai. UN climate chief Simon Stiles urged countries on Wednesday to agree on an ambitious action to tackle global warming at the COP28 climate summit rather than fall into the trap of point scoring and lowest common denominator politics.
The win on loss and damage here in Dubai gave this COP a spring in its step. But it is just the start. Now all governments must give their negotiators clear marching orders. We need highest ambition, not point scoring or lowest common denominator politics.
Now, the World Meteorological Organization, WMO, released a report on the sidelines of the UN climate conference COP28 on Tuesday. The report states that 2011 to 2020 was the warmest decade on record and that extreme weather events increased during that period. The report attributed the warming trend to rising concentrations of greenhouse gases, leading to extreme weather events and sea level rise. WMO Deputy Secretary General also warned that the trend will continue in the current decade and will lead to an increase in extreme weather patterns.
In terms of the global temperature, this decade is the warmest ever. It's 1.1 degrees Celsius average 10-year period. And it's, every previous decade was also warmer than the preceding ones. And the amount of the natural disasters and weather and climate extremes, which we also monitor as a part of this state of climate, is again raises lots of concerns for us.
Next, in the latest update on Cyclone MCJ from India's southern region, the Indian Meteorological Department said MCJ has weakened into a deep depression over central coastal Andhra Pradesh. Despite the landfall in Andhra Pradesh, the southern and coastal districts of East Indian state Odisha have been put on alert since Tuesday night, with heavy rainfall forecast as severe cyclone MCJ moved northward. Rescue and relief operations are underway in the affected areas, with local authorities and disaster response teams working to assist those affected by the cyclone and subsequent flooding. Next news from India's Parliament. Lok Sabha, India's lower house of Parliament, on Tuesday passed the Jammu and Kashmir Reservation Bill 2023 and Jammu and Kashmir Reorganisation Bills. The Jammu and Kashmir Reservation Act provides reservation in appointment in state government posts and admission to professional institutions for certain reserved categories, while the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganisation Act 2019 provides for the reorganisation of the state of Jammu and Kashmir into the union territories of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. The bill increases the total number of seats in the Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly from 83 to 90. Replying in the lower house, India's Home Minister Amit Shah said that 2 seats have been reserved for the Kashmiri migrant community members.
2 सीटें कश्मीरी विस्थापितों के लिए होगी जो घाटी से विस्थापित हुए हैं, और 1 सीट पाक ऑक्यूपाई जम्मू कश्मीर के विस्थापित व्यक्तियों के लिए नामित की जाएगी। इसमें से 1 महिला होना जरूरी है।
India's Home Minister Amit Shah added that 24 seats have been reserved for Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, POK.
जम्मू में पहले 37 सीटें थी, अब 43 हुई है, 43 हुई है। कश्मीर में पहले 46 थी, अब 47 हुई है, और पाक ऑक्यूपाई कश्मीर की 24 सीटें, क्योंकि वो हमारा है, हमने रिजर्व रखी है।
In some business news now, ratings agency Moody slapped a downgrade warning on China's credit rating on Tuesday, saying costs to bail out local governments and state firms and control its property crisis would weigh on the world's number 2 economy. Moody lowered the outlook on China's A1 debt rating to negative from stable less than a month after it had done the same to the United States. Moody's also cited increased risks related to structurally and persistently lower medium-term economic growth and the ongoing downsizing of the property sector there. And now let's take a look at other stories making news around the world. Italian teenage kiteboarder Andrea Principi won the world's most extreme big air kiteboarding contest off the coast of Cape Town, South Africa, in front of a crowd of around 6,000 people. The 19-year-old came out on top in the battle with his training partners Lorenzo Casati and Jeremy Berlando. A far-right party leader in North Macedonia, suspected in a double murder, including a 14-year-old girl, was arrested in Turkey. The bodies of a girl and of a 74-year-old man who went missing a few days before her were found. According to the police, 4 people were involved in both these crimes, including the girl's father. A funeral ceremony took place at the residence of the 20-year-old hiker who was killed in Indonesia's Merapi volcanic eruption. Her loved ones grieved for their loss. And Indian state of Gujarat's Garba dance form, it's a folk dance form. It has achieved a momentous milestone by securing a position on UNESCO's representative list of intangible cultural heritage. Garba is a cultural tradition embodying celebration, devotion, gender inclusivity, social equality, and of course, it transcends borders. That's it in this edition of DD India Global. Do join us for another edition of the show at 7:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram at DD India Live. You can also find us online at ddindia.co.in. We will be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I am Tanvi Taneja from my entire team in New Delhi. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.
गर फिरदौस बर रुए